Sometimes holding on to something old isn't about living in the past. It's about preserving what matters most for the future. Today's story is about a small camera shop, a struggling photographer, and how staying true to your values can lead to the most unexpected miracles. It's a reminder that in our rush to embrace the new, we sometimes forget the irreplaceable magic of what came before. Welcome to Humanity Stories. Before we start today's incredible tale, take a moment to join our community of storytellers and dreamers who believe in the power of human connection. Now, let me take you to a little shop where time stands still and every camera holds 1,000 stories. The morning light filtered through the dusty windows of Chen's classic cameras, casting long shadows across glass display cases that housed memories frozen in time. Marcus Chen stood at the counter, holding an overdue electricity bill in one hand and his grandfather's old Rolleiflex in the other. The camera's twin lenses stared back at him like knowing eyes, witnesses to both the shop's glory days and its current struggle to survive. This morning's bank statement showed a balance that couldn't cover both the rent and the utilities. Outside, the city rushed forward into the digital age, but inside these walls, time moved differently. Vintage cameras lined the shelves like silent guardians, their brass and leather surfaces gleaming with decades of stories. Each one had passed through human hands, captured precious moments, preserved pieces of lives that would otherwise be lost to time. Marcus ran his fingers along the worn wooden counter, feeling the smooth patches where thousands of hands had rested while discussing apertures, shutter speeds, and the art of catching light in a box. His grandfather had installed this counter himself in 1962, using wood salvaged from shipping crates that had carried his dreams across the ocean from Hong Kong. "A camera is a time machine," his grandfather used to say, his accent thick but his wisdom clear. "Every photograph is a moment saved from disappearing forever." Now, 60 years later, it was the shop itself that seemed in danger of disappearing. Just yesterday, another real estate agent had stopped by with an offer that could solve all his problems. The neighborhood was up and coming, she'd said, code for the steady erasure of everything that made it special. The vintage bookstore across the street had become a juice bar. The old record shop was now a chain coffee place. Each closure felt like watching a family photo fade in the sun. The bell above the door chimed, pulling Marcus from his thoughts. A teenage girl walked in, phone in hand, looking almost apologetic about entering such an obviously ancient place. "Can I help you?" Marcus asked, carefully setting down his grandfather's camera. Yeah," she said, glancing around uncertainly. "My dad found this old camera in our attic. He said this was the only place that might know what it is." From her backpack, she pulled out a leather case, worn smooth by years of use. Marcus gently opened the case, and his heart skipped a beat. Inside was a Leica M3, probably from the 1950s, its rangefinder window slightly clouded, but its mechanical heart undoubtedly still strong. "This," he said, carefully lifting the camera, "is a piece of history. See these scratches? Each one is a story. This camera has probably seen more of the world than most people do in a lifetime." The girl's eyes widened as Marcus showed her how to wind the film advance, how to focus using the rangefinder, how the mechanical shutter could still capture moments without needing a single battery. For a few minutes, she forgot about her phone, caught up in the tactile magic of gears and springs and precision-ground glass. "Could you—" She hesitated. "Could you show me how to use it?" That's how it often started. People would wander in, curious about these relics from another time, and find themselves drawn into a world where images weren't instant, where every frame mattered, where patience and skill created something permanent and real. Marcus looked at the stack of bills on his counter, then at the girl's genuine interest in this piece of photographic history. His mother's voice echoed in his head. "You can't pay rent with tradition, Marcus. Sometimes we have to let go of the past." But as he began explaining the basics of film photography to his young visitor, Marcus felt the familiar certainty settle in his chest. This wasn't just about cameras or photographs, it was about preserving a way of seeing the world, a way of slowing down and really looking at what was in front of you. It was about keeping alive the magic that happened in the space between clicking the shutter and seeing the image appear in the darkroom. Little did he know that same morning, in a law office across town, someone else was thinking about Chen's classic cameras. Someone whose arrival would change everything. The bell chimed again that afternoon. This time the visitor made the old wooden floors creak with purposeful steps. A woman in a tailored suit stood at the counter, her leather briefcase gleaming in the dusty sunlight. She seemed out of place among the vintage equipment and fading photographs, like a sentence in Times New Roman mixed into a page of handwritten letters. Marcus Chen, her voice carried the kind of authority that made the air itself stand at attention. Marcus nodded, quickly wiping the developer stains from his hands. He'd just finished showing the teenager how to load film into her father's Leica, and the chemical smell of the darkroom still clung to his clothes. I represent the estate of Thomas Walker. The name hit Marcus like a physical force. Thomas Walker wasn't just a photographer, he was a guardian of moments that defined generations. His black and white photographs had captured everything from civil rights marches to quiet mornings in small-town diners. Each image seemed to hold entire worlds within its frame. Mr. Walker passed away last month, the woman continued, opening her briefcase. She paused, looking at the wall of photographs behind Marcus. Countless moments captured by customers over the shop's 60-year history. But 2 weeks before his death, he spent several hours in this shop. Marcus's mind raced back. He remembered that day differently now. An elderly gentleman in a worn jacket, moving slowly among the displays, running his fingers along camera bodies like he was reading Braille. Marcus had been busy with other customers, but he recalled the man talking with Jenny, his weekend assistant, for hours. Your young assistant told him about your grandfather, the lawyer said, her professional demeanor softening slightly. About how he arrived with just one camera and built all this. About how you've kept everything exactly as he left it. She pulled out a photograph. Not one of Walker's famous shots, but a simple picture of the shop's interior taken recently. In it, afternoon light streamed through the windows, turning dust motes into stars and making the brass fittings on old cameras glow like warm memories. Mr. Walker bought his first professional camera from a shop like this, she continued. A small place in Chicago, run by an old German immigrant. That shop taught him not just how to use a camera, but how to see the world. It's gone now, replaced by a convenience store. When he walked in here, she gestured around the shop, he said it was like stepping back into that moment when he first fell in love with photography. From her briefcase, she produced a thick envelope. Mr. Walker left you his entire collection of cameras and equipment, along with the rights to display and sell prints of his personal photography collection. Marcus felt the floor shift under his feet. The value of Walker's collection alone would keep the shop running for years. The rights to his images, that could preserve its future for generations. But there's one condition, she said, her voice firm. The shop stays exactly as it is. No modernization, no digital displays, no compromise on its character. Mr. Walker believed places like this need to exist, not as museums, but as living workshops where people can still discover the magic of real photography. She reached into her briefcase one final time and withdrew a worn leather case. Inside was Walker's personal Leica M3, the camera that had captured some of the most iconic images of the 20th century. He wanted you to have this too, she said softly. He said it wasn't about the camera itself, but about what it represents. Sometimes the old ways aren't just about the past. They're about remembering that some things are worth doing slowly, worth doing by hand, worth preserving because they teach us to see the world differently. As Marcus held the camera, He felt its weight, not just the physical heaviness of brass and glass, but the weight of all the moments it had witnessed, all the stories it had told, all the truth it had captured. Through its viewfinder, entire worlds had been seen and saved. That evening, after the lawyer had left and the papers were signed, Marcus sat alone in the darkroom, developing the test roll from the teenager's restored Leica. As the images slowly appeared in the developer, he thought about how every photograph was a kind of miracle, light and time captured in silver and shadow, moments rescued from the rushing river of time. But even then, he couldn't have imagined how Walker's gift would transform not just the shop, but an entire community. Word spread about Thomas Walker's connection to the shop, like light leaking onto unexposed film. At first, it was just serious photographers who came, drawn by the legendary collection. But soon, something unexpected began to develop. A young mother brought in her grandfather's old camera, found in an attic box. "He took pictures of everything," she said, eyes bright with memories. "I want my kids to know what that feels like, to hold a moment in your hands, not just swipe past it on a screen." Marcus started offering workshops in the back room, teaching the patience of manual focus and the arithmetic of light. He watched faces light up in the darkroom as images appeared like magic in the developing tray, the same wonder he'd felt when his grandfather first showed him this miracle of chemistry and time. One Saturday morning, a group of high school students crowded around the counter, their smartphones temporarily forgotten as they learned to load film into vintage cameras. "It's like meditation," one girl said, carefully winding the advance lever. "You have to slow down and really think about each shot." The shop became more than a store. It became a bridge between generations. Grandparents brought grandchildren to learn on the same kind of cameras they'd used decades ago. Family photos, faded and creased, were given new life through careful restoration. Each image that passed through Marcus's hands carried its own story, its own piece of someone's heart. Then something remarkable started happening in the neighborhood. The coffee chain next door closed, replaced by an artisanal cafe where photographers gathered to share their work. The empty storefront across the street became a vinyl record shop, its owner saying he'd been inspired by Chen's dedication to analog arts. One by one, other small businesses returned, each preserving something valuable from the past. A bookbinder opened her shop, teaching traditional crafts. A letterpress printer set up studio, the rhythmic sound of his press joining the symphony of mechanical shutters and rewinding film. Marcus created a new wall in the shop called New Stories Old Light, displaying photographs taken by his students on vintage cameras. There was the first portrait a teenager had ever developed herself, the last photo a daughter had taken of her father, the moment a child first saw a Polaroid picture develop in his hands. Each image was a testament to the power of slowing down, of really seeing, of holding on to the things that matter. The final photograph on that wall was taken with Walker's Leica, a shot of the shop at sunrise, light streaming through the windows, dust motes dancing like stars. And if you looked closely in the window's reflection, you might see something that could be a coincidence or could be magic. The silhouette of an elderly man with a camera, smiling at what his gift had helped preserve. "You see," Marcus would tell his students, "every photograph is a conversation between light and time, between what we see and what we feel. But more than that, it's a promise to remember, to hold on to the moments that make us who we are." Today, Chen's classic cameras still stands, not as a relic of the past, but as a guardian of something timeless. In a world racing toward the future, it reminds us that some things are worth preserving. Not because they're old, but because they help us see the world in ways that never grow old. And that's what I love most about this story. It reminds us that sometimes what looks like holding on to the past is really about protecting something precious for the future. If this tale touched your heart, make sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. I'd love to know, what's something traditional in your life that you think is worth preserving? something that might seem old-fashioned to others, but holds real value for you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to be part of our community of storytellers and memory keepers, hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Every week, we share stories that remind us of the magic hiding in plain sight, the kind of magic that happens when we slow down enough to really see it. Until next time, remember, in a world that's always rushing forward, sometimes the most revolutionary thing we can do is pause, look closely, and preserve what matters most. See you in our next story, where we'll explore another tale of unexpected beauty in everyday life. The legacy of Thomas Walker's gift wasn't just about saving a camera shop. It was about preserving a way of seeing the world, one carefully composed frame at a time. And in doing so, it reminded everyone who walked through those doors that some things are worth saving, worth doing slowly, worth holding on to with both hands and a full heart. In the end, every photograph is a kind of miracle, light and time captured in silver and shadow, moments rescued from the rushing river of time. And sometimes, if we're lucky, we find places like Chen's classic cameras, where those miracles are still happening every day, one click at a time.